All right, everybody, welcome back to the Spark Show, episode 13 today. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of our domestic narratives, foreign narratives, things that are going on in the world right now that seem to be stirring up a media frenzy. I'd like to welcome our co-host Cameron back here on the show. Been having a good pre-show conversation about what exactly is going on and the things that are creating media narratives and what our stance is essentially on all this stuff. I think when we hopped on and we're chatting this morning, it was a little bit about this new Republican Party that wants to emerge out of the ashes of MAGA. And Tucker Carlson seems to be thinking that he's going to lead the party, and that if he walks away from today's MAGA Republican Party, that he's going to be creating the new non-America Last party. And I really wanted to hear your take on that, Cameron. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know where he thinks he's getting his support from. Maybe he looks at his views, and most of his views are maybe coming from Pakistan. So he's like, wow, man, look at all these views that I get. I'm super popular. I'm going to be creating the next big movement or something. But I don't know. All I see is, the polls come out and Donald Trump within, those who identify as MAGA is over 80%. And then Tucker Carlson's is down below 5%. So I don't know who's breaking away from Trump and going along with Tucker Carlson, but I don't know. I mean, you just listen to the guy for 1 second and he always concedes he's always wrong, that his principles always get in the way of, pragmatic realities, and that's the reason why he can never be a politician. So you're like, okay, so you're saying you can never get anything done and you're always wrong, and you're going to create the next big movement that's going to be America first? It's like, I'm not getting a lot of confidence here, guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting take. I mean, I think Tucker Carlson especially, and a lot of these other people that think they want to break away from the MAGA movement, they're acting like a bunch of whiny toddlers who don't get their way, especially because of foreign policy.
Yeah.
And then they use the likes of a Charlie Kirk, who before he passed away had a stance on Iran war, because this was all the pretext to the war when this was going down and when he passed, saying that he didn't believe we should be in Iran. And I think a lot of people could agree, like, we don't want to be in Iran. And Trump did promise no new wars and no endless wars. However, when we have something that needs to be accomplished, he's going to go in, he's going to execute. And then when we resolve these issues, we're going to end it. We're not going to stay in like we did Iraq with George W. Bush. We're not going to continue staying there. We're not going to continue to exploit war and create, these economic booms and warfare and allow insider trading profits to occur for people who are pro-war. It's just ridiculous.
Opportunists.
Right.
Well, the biggest thing is like, America Last is sitting on your hands when a fluid situation is unfolding in front of you. And that's what our politicians did. And it was always, okay, what's the focus group say? What do the polls say? How do I move? How am I going to navigate this, And it's like, when it comes down to it, you have to make a judgment call. And for all those that say that this administration had no plan, they clearly had a plan. You could see the board, they took out Panama, they took out Venezuela, so they took out all these things. They started reorientating, opening up all of our oil exports, and then they went into Iran. So clearly they had a plan of what they're doing here. And then what do we come and find out? We come to find out how strategically important the Strait of Hormuz is. It's like 30% of, petroleum products or whatever coming out of there that can negatively affect the American consumer. So it is America first finally resolving this 50-year conundrum that is the Middle East that no one is willing to deal with, because Iran has always been the big, bad, evil boogeyman that no one can deal with, because we're going to get drowned into a ground war. And you constantly see the shifting of narratives, like with the likes of Tucker Carlson and stuff like that, when as Trump starts accomplishing his goals, it's just like, okay, how do I shift around this? And now it's this whole, well, this is America last. America engaging on the world stage is America last. How is that? I don't get it, you know? And we're not in a forever war. So, but then it's wild because it takes a nuanced perspective of everything, all the pieces that are happening, and then coming to a conclusion. But most political commentators, it's nuance doesn't exist. It's you went against my principles, therefore you're the enemy. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, I think this new America last, done with that narrative that Tucker's drumming up right now, is pretty pathetic. You know, he's picking up narratives that Joe Biden was pushing, essentially wanting to cancel student debt, but in a different way. And this is an interesting term because I believe you called it the Marxist right
Yeah.
theory, right? And this is, you know, instead of eliminating student debt through government policy, we would be essentially just protesting. Tucker claims that he doesn't want people to pay their student loans back. He wants everybody just to full stop paying as protest to the institution, the Department of Education, and any of these institutions, the banks that are loaning at these vicious interest rates on their student loans that don't let people out of the cycle of it. He's claiming that people should stop paying their credit cards because interest rates are sky high, in that it's predatory to even be sending out credit card offers to college students. And so everybody with a credit card with a massive interest rate should just stop paying their credit cards. And thirdly, I think he would appreciate it if everyone just protested the entire administration by, you know, voting independent, you know, in the next race.
Mm-hmm.
But there is nobody who's actually leading a movement to do that. If anything, that's just nonsense. And it all sounds good on paper, right? But in reality,
Yeah.
not a good idea.
Yeah. Maybe it drums up views on social media, but you're like, okay, so you're encouraging young people to commit financial suicide. That sounds retarded. What did Charlie Kirk say? How about just don't get those loans? Go to trade school. You can make just as much money. You don't have to do this whole nonsense, you know, college thing. That was his whole shtick, from what I understand. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. I guess we face it too. What are we going to talk about today? What are we going to do? What's the show going to be about today? You know, and it's just like, well, let's just feed the outrage machine, I guess. You know, I don't know. I mean, it kind of blows me away how I really like to listen to that guy. And then now it's just nails on a chalkboard. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you saying? That's insane.
Well, it's weird to see Tucker and, you know, like the likes of Megyn Kelly and all of these, you know, investigative journalists, sort of, you know, influencer like media figures be so aligned with the MAGA movement. And, you know, everyone claims to be a friend of Charlie Kirk and all of these people who were united on this front to get Trump into the White House for a second term. But now it's like Charlie's gone. Trump did some things he said that he wasn't going to do. And now it's like we need to make a full U-turn. That's that's interesting. You know, it really makes me feel like these are not authentic figures. These are people just driving outrage. They just want to push a narrative that sells. And, you know, like we're struggling. I mean, we're still on the Trump train. We still support Donald Trump and his actions and his policy and everything he's doing. And maybe not everything, but for the most part. But all of these people who claim to have been on his ship, getting him to the White House, are now jumping ship and saying, we're done.
Yeah, well, that's because they're worried about their viewership and they're worried about their reputation online. That's what I would argue at the end of the day. But when I look at it, like, so this whole thing, because it all stems around Iran and everything that's going on around Iran. And what is the opposition always saying? Israel controls us. We're controlled by Israel. And they're always, they're forcing us to fight their wars. And you're like, okay, well, let's concede exactly that. So what do we need to do to get rid of that? Right? Well, you have to actually face the situation on the ground, which is Iran. So the two belligerents in the Middle East are Israel and Iran. So that's the solution, or that's the problem that you have to find a solution for. And so this administration actually has the cojones to face it and try to do something about it instead of kicking the can down the road as prior administrations had done. And so it's like, I think Marco Rubio said, well, the Israelis were going to hit us. And I don't think he was supposed to say that. So they tried to roll that one back, but he kind of let the cat out of the bag that the crazy, Israeli government they're going to hit them. And it's like, well, we're going to get hit. So, okay. And they had a plan already in place. Pentagon already has all these war game plans. And boom, they executed on it. And then Trump was, well, actually, we got to pull back. I don't see, you don't know how true that is because, like I said earlier, you had the Venezuela situation, you had the Panama situation. So clearly they were gearing up to this end. So, I mean, these are the nuanced takes. You have to look at all the information that's out there and go, okay, wait, what is actually going on here? And so, but look at what actually occurred. The narrative out there right now is that America lost, and we're conceding. And Donald Trump started this stupid war, and now he's tucking tail and running because he's afraid he's not going to get reelected in the midterms. And, because we're giving up these 10 things and all Iran has to do is 2 things. And we're giving Iran $300 billion. And in a war, who receives the money, the loser or the winner? You're like, I mean, it's so reductionist. This whole thing. It's like, or there's an actual negotiation going on. It's like, okay, let's run the numbers because the numbers I ever see, look at how much money America has lost. Look at how many $20 billion in aircraft gone, 42 aircraft or something like that. Bases hit, all this sort of stuff. But who does the battlefield damage assessment of Iran? Have you seen anything? How much money do you think Iran has lost in assets?
Oof. I mean, it's got to be in the billions.
Okay, we've lost 50 billion, let's say. How much do you think Iran's lost?
Oh, then hundreds of billions.
500 billion.
Oh, wow.
So it's actually, the estimates are anywhere from 300 billion to 1 trillion, depending on who we're looking at. So I heard it from Victor Davis Hanson. He was talking about it. 500 billion in assets that the Iranians have accumulated over their, almost 50-year reign. So when you lose $500 billion in assets and it cost us 50 billion, and then if you all the operations, everything that we've done leading into this, about 100 billion. So we're at a 1 to 5. And then on top of that, you got they put together then the economic fury, right? So not only Operation Epic Fury, then you got the Operation Economic Fury, and they were losing 500 million a day. So, and then within this whole, the blockade cycle, they lost somewhere around almost $5 billion in revenue. So you've lost 500 billion in assets, 5 billion in revenue. And then Donald Trump comes to you and goes, look all we're looking for is normalized relations. No more terrorism, no more nuclear bombs and we're out. We don't need this anymore. We're putting together this Abraham Accords. You're working with Pakistan. You're working with Qatar, Oman, and then you have your intermediaries and they're working with Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi and Israel and Jordan and Syria. And so that's Trump's vision, is tying these people together economically and sidelining the hardliners that are saying for every Israeli tier, there needs to be 1,000 tiers of, the enemy's mothers or whatever it was. What was that saying?
So this was Israel's defense minister lashing out a day or two ago, and it got everybody riled up because of the attacks going on in Lebanon, which could potentially cause conflict or, dissolving of the memorandum of understanding, rightfully so. So this is Ben-Gvir, Israel's defense minister, and he says, for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep. All of Lebanon must burn. With all due respect to the Americans, Israel must make it clear to the entire world that the blood of our sons and security of our citizens are not forfeit. All of Lebanon must burn. Our supreme duty is to protect the citizens of Israel and the soldiers of the IDF, and this commitment takes precedence over every other consideration. I told the Prime Minister, even in our private meetings, for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers must weep. Enough with the ping pong. In the Middle East, you don't win with measured responses and restraint. You need to go berserk, to obliterate, to crush the terror.
All I hear is death to America. Israel and America, the great Satan. You're like, well, when you're saying for one, we take 1,000, that's pretty evil.
You're like, yeah,
That's pretty.
it doesn't go fucking one eye
for one
for
I know that's
1,000.
that's like the biblical thing, eye for an eye. Like that's like the Israel law or whatever.
Here's my take. I get the emotional response from Americans because we live in a very safe and secure nation. We don't have anybody on our northern border attacking us or firing missiles at us domestically. We don't have anybody on our southern border firing missiles or attacking us domestically. The closest thing we have to domestic terrorism on our front is narco-terrorism with drugs, sex trafficking, human trafficking, cartel terror, those kinds of things happening, but they rarely occur on our front, on our land. This is all happening in Mexico for the most part. We see that, the Department of Justice and, all these other organizations right now are taking care of that. And even people, seeing it on videos of declassified military strikes on these narco terrorists and these drug smuggling boats and stuff are freaking out because they believe that these people deserve, due process, that you can't actually, claim these people are smuggling drugs unless you actually get on that boat and test the drugs or the big bins that are on there that you clearly see in our videos. And it's kind of wild because the one thing I understand is, or the closest thing I think Americans have ever gotten to the emotional response that we could claim maybe Israelis have every day of life from seeing missile threats and terrorist bombings and suicide bombings and all these horrific things going on over in their country, which we are not exposed to here in the United States. The closest thing we ever had to that type of emotional response was 9/11. That was essentially, our one reminder. And what did that do to us as a nation? Man, that fired up the war machine. That was the first time in my lifetime where I ever saw a United States ready to go to war. That was an attack where everyone was unanimous on, we're going to go and obliterate these people. We're going to go berserk, right? We're going to crush that enemy for what they did because they physically took people from us. That was the worst terror attack we've ever had domestically in the United States.
Yeah.
Thousands of Americans, right?
Yeah, no, a bunch of Saudis and we went and attacked Iraq.
Well, that's one theory, and so.
No, it's legit. FBI, they're all a bunch of Saudis, but we can't disrupt the apple cart with the Saudis, but we want, and that was the whole neocon and endless war adventurism.
My point to it is that when I hear something like that from the Israeli defense minister or whatever he is that I don't want to say I understand, and that's okay because it's not. But also, we're not exposed to that same violence, and it's hard to understand where their emotional response is coming from.
Well, yeah, I get it because my take on the Camarlo Anthony thing got a lot of people really angry. Man, they were going straight up Jim Crow, hang him from the apple tree, lynch him. You're just like, geez, guys, you guys are out of control. And they're like, well, how would you feel if it was your child? And you're like, bro, you know what I mean? It's like out of control, bloodlust. And that's the problem. The Middle East is soaked in blood because there's, I don't know, something in the water over there where it's just like, it's all about blood and bloodletting, blood sacrifice. I mean, actually, if you think about it from a biblical perspective, that's what it was. It was all blood sacrifice, and that's like kind of what God was putting an end to, with the coming of Jesus Christ. He was supposed to be the final blood sacrifice.
Well, to me, it's like they're still living in medieval times over there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's kind of crazy, but why is that? It's because the psychopaths are in power. And it's just like the people that are just trying to get on with their lives, create businesses for, for some sort of economic prosperity for their families are you know, they're shut out. And that's the difference, is where it's like, okay, I mean, think about it. You know, why did Trump, you know, try to cut the head off the snake with the IRGC and the, you know, and the Ayatollah and the mullahs and all that, whatever it is? Well, it's to try to get rid of the psychos so that the younger people could kind of see. So yeah, but they're the fighting age ones and they're ready to go. But then the reality's on the ground. You lost 500 billion in assets. You're losing 500 million a day. You can't pay your soldiers. And then we're doing cyber warfare and all your banking systems. So, and then you're going, hey, we'll give you a $300 billion fund to reconstitute your economy, not your military, and, you know, join the rest of the world. And then guess what? The psychos in Israel don't have the, we're going to wipe the terrorists off the map. You know, it's like, okay, can we get rid of those guys now? Can Israel vote in less extreme people? Because it's like you said, they got rockets flying from the south. They got rockets flying from the north. And then the more moderate voices in Israel are going to get drowned out because they're the ones saying, hey, we need to take a measured approach. And in that instance, that no one wants a measured approach. They want annihilate them all, you know? And it's like, well, that's not pragmatic.
You know, I think of the terrorism that goes on in the Middle East as savagery, right? In that, what did we do in the United States to eradicate savagery from colonizing this place?
Rule of law.
Rule of law, but what else happened before we established rule of law? Extermination. The savages here were the Native Americans, the Indians.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah.
Right? And what did we have to do in order to create law and order? We had to exterminate savage, you know, people. And what they did was they went on a full crusade. I know that's a tough one to digest. It's not one that people like to acknowledge. But
well, we didn't exterminate them. We forced them onto reservations.
Well, I think the Native Americans would argue that there was an extermination in effect, and the ones that did survive.
No, we cut their nuts off. We didn't exterminate them. We neutered them.
Sure. I mean, there were definitely, you know,
well, there were great battles with great slaughters, but they also slaughtered us, you know.
You could also argue that the conquistadors down in Mexico, Spain came in and wiped out civilizations that existed there long before their arrival.
500 men.
Well,
that's nonsense. That's just a narrative that's been pushed. You know, somehow 500 men took out millions of Native Americans.
Well, then how did these?
It was just it was mostly smallpox, and then
so you think more diseases that were brought by the conquistadors pretty much wiped out these civilizations, things we couldn't cure, and that pretty much just rapidly spread and wiped these people out.
Yeah, it was smallpox.
Yeah,
smallpox is what took them out. It was like 22 million. I think
so.
Was
You're
the total.
Gonna challenge the 500 conquistadors took out a civilization, but you're not going to argue about the Spartans and the Persians.
Well,
huh?
They mean the 300 in the gates of hell or whatever it was
against the army of 10,000 Persians.
I'm pretty sure they all died.
They did all die,
but
they rallied the rest.
Yeah. But no, because actually, if you look into the story of the conquistadors and I don't know Cortez and all that sort of stuff. He was actually, he was breaking ranks with the governor of Cuba who said, no, you're not allowed to do this. So they actually sent a few thousand men after him because he was a fugitive of the law. So it's like, it's kind of crazy because there's much more dynamic that's working there and just like, oh, the evil white man came over here and wiped us all out. I was like, no, actually, you had this fugitive that came over with 500 men looking for gold or something like that. And they actually stumble across the native population who is oppressed by their neighbor, and they're over it. And they basically, I believe they fought with the Spanish, but because the Spanish were able to fight them off, they then created an alliance, and then they marched on Tenochtitlan, and if that is the actual name, I'm impressed.
Yeah. So getting back to my original point about Iran and how this all feeds into that.
Hey, dude, we're just doing the weed.
Yeah,
buddy.
we took the detour here. And what point does modern day society say you only get this many chances to behave before we actually come in with boots on the ground install a new government, and say you cannot live this way or, create this type of terror anymore? When do we finally say is enough? Because Israel is clearly there. They've had enough of the terror. They do not want to live this way. They would like peace in the Middle East.
Where you're
Israel
willing
is only,
to lose 10 million lives.
and I'm not saying I am for,
Because that's the reality.
crushing.
That's the reality. So either you can attempt Trump's plan, or you can create this World War III scenario where people that are sympathetic to the Iranian cause, support them, and then those who are sympathetic to the Israeli cause, which is only the United States, by the way, because Europe has separated themselves from it.
100%.
So it's like, Israel's backed themselves into the corner with sort of their extreme positioning on this because, sorry, the West sensibilities to killing, human life is very sensitive. So, that's why they call what you're doing in Gaza a genocide. That's why they call what you're doing in Lebanon a genocide. You argue it's not a genocide, but then one of your ministers is going, for every one, I want 1,000. You're like, that kind of sounds like a genocide.
Well, it's interesting, back in the Iraq War, I can clearly remember Italy tanks ripping through Iraq there at the behest of the Americans. I remember the Britain being there. I remember all of the flags of our allies being there on the ground, figuring this thing out, going to win this war back when, being an ally meant that you stood side by side with one another.
Uh-huh.
Trump is now calling out Italy yesterday, saying, you're pathetic. Where were you? You failed to defend Europe.
Well, what did I just say? They're squeamish.
Well,
they're extremely squeamish. Because it was a bunch of horse shit. And then it caused the mass migration effect into Europe where, look at Europe, It displaced basically the Middle East into Europe. So the Europeans want nothing to do with Middle East adventurism.
Adventurism? What is this, fucking Disneyland?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is basically.
I mean, dude, it's like they are the closest ones to the conflict.
Yes, absolutely, which is why they maybe should have had a more nuanced conversation with Trump about what his plans and goals and objectives were. Maybe they didn't offer that. Maybe they didn't articulate it. But that's one of those things where you possibly give up the element of surprise if you're going, hey, everyone, let's get together and have a meeting about what I'm going to secretly try to do in Iran, So I get it. But at the same time, you gotta hold them accountable because you can now see, now that the moves that Trump has made, and now he's lost, as everyone's saying, but he achieved his objectives, and the main objective is the nuclear weapon that he didn't want, and the funding of terrorism. That's ultimately, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because now why are we even in the Middle East? If you get rid of the Iranian nuclear and terror threat, now you don't need America world police in the Middle East, right? Essentially, now the local players can actually work within each other's, to resolve issues instead of just lobbing missiles at each other and chanting, genocidal rhetoric, So it's like, I get it, but for the Italians, maybe they're looking at it like, whoa, dude, what are we doing over here? Because, I mean, Trump put in he did a shock and awe campaign, and it was probably very alarming to everyone. Like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, we're going to have a full-on war, boots on the ground. That's what everyone was saying. If you listen to the podcast sphere,
whoa, this is crazy. Trump's stepping in to avoid us getting fucking obliterated with a nuclear bomb on our country because we're one of the first in the pathway.
Yeah, but that's hindsight,
But like, to the people that say Trump is arrogant or that the world is laughing at him, is it so laughable that he's stepping up to defend your worthless nations that can't put one foot in front of the other to defend yourselves? They're acting like the UK as a whole. They're saying, we don't care for our personal security. We don't want to be called Islamophobes. We don't want to be called racists. We don't want to go to war.
This is the difference between principles and pragmatism. You know, that's why principled people don't get shit done. And pragmatists actually look at the situation, the realities on the ground and go, okay, what is the best way forward through this quagmire? You know, everyone's like, Trump's dragging us into a quagmire. Newsflash, we're already in the, we're waist deep in the quagmire and have been for a very long time. And he's actually trying to get us out of the quagmire.
Maybe this is the dangerous thing about Donald Trump. He's been on the record saying that while he is a Christian, he doesn't believe he's going to be going to heaven because of the things that he's had to do. And maybe that's the dangerous thing about him, is that he does believe in God, but he believes that he had to do things for the betterment of society, at least the American people.
Well,
I truly believe it's for the whole world, not just for the American people.
I've always argued that he is like a biblical character, like the kings or the judges, where he's very flawed.
Don't be making assertions that Trump is like a king on this show.
Oh, what do you mean?
We can't be giving in to the Democrats.
Oh, yeah. He's like a king. Well, I mean, if you look at, you know, the only real power that a president has is, you know, his foreign, you know, war-making power, you know, because he doesn't really have any power domestically because of all the checks and balances that we have with the judiciary and the legislative branch. But that's besides the point. That he is single-handedly reordering the international order. And he's recentering, because the international order, basically, it's just this institutionalized idea that the West is in decline, and so we just need to manage the decline, and then the rising power of China will take over. And so you have all the elites shifting over their resources so that they're fine, but then us poor people, we can be left-handed holding the bag. And Trump is saying, no, absolutely not. That is not going to happen. We are going to actually, you know, maybe he loses, maybe his big gambit loses, but what was the other alternative? Kamala Harris and continued decline and, you know, flooding our borders? You know, it's like, and that's getting back to Tucker Carlson. Like, what's the alternative, dude? Because the Democrats have lost their mind. You know, like, it's funny. People think, you know, because I support Trump, I'm automatically must be a conservative. But like, I've done my political compass test. I've actually done the footwork. I know where I stand. I'm a left-leaning libertarian, but I caucus with the conservatives because I can actually have a conversation over there. And it's actually based in reality, not in this nonsense where men can get pregnant. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the alternative. Like, socialists and feminists that have wrecked the Democrat Party
Hijacked.
with ideology. And it's like, where does my liberal libertarian view, where does that align with the Democrats? You know what I mean? Like,
it aligned with the Democrats back in 1990 when they shared those views with you.
Yeah.
And they left you back there. And they left you no other choice but to join the Republican Party.
So why am I with the Republicans? Because of my libertarian values. That's why I'm with. Not necessarily my left-leaning, you know, obviously. That's where, because I'm not as extreme when it comes to, you know, views on gay marriage and drug and all that good stuff and like IVF and, you know. And that's why, I mean, then it's pretty funny. You're like, if you actually would probably do Donald Trump's political compass test, he's probably left-leaning.
Oh, geez. I mean, the guy, he's like, you know, the first president to come in and openly advocate for gay marriage. He's the first president to come in and openly assign, you know, openly gay members of his cabinet to some of the highest positions of the cabinet. You know, it's like.
And women.
I mean, he puts, you know, members of the LGBT community in high positions of power. He puts women in high positions of power. I mean, look at Tulsi Gabbard, director of national intelligence. I mean, yeah, Scott Bessent. It's like, come on, these people don't want to give in to anything that you know Trump has done for their communities.
Well, because they are stuck in these cults of personality. It's the same thing. Like, okay, that's the best part, because it's like, what is it? Projection. Confession through projection, right? So it's, you know, life is like a mirror, everything that you're putting out there is actually just a reflection of who you are. So anytime you're seeing someone that's attacking another person, it's mostly that own judgment that they feel on the inside that they're just projecting out onto the world. And so you see like the left calling, the Israelis a bunch of genocidal maniacs, but then like look at their behavior. I mean, how is it not genocidal to want to castrate your children and to force them into puberty blockers to where they can't actually have any offspring? You know what I mean? It's like that suicidal empathy sort of thing. It's just a different flavor. You know what I mean? And I lost my train of thought on that one, so take over.
Well, just getting back to, the suicidal empathy that we have nowadays, it's like nobody wants to be at war with Iran because nobody wants to see lives lost.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone, and I am like that too, very much after I became a father. I was very much like, okay, we don't need to go in and just carpet bomb Iran and just cause, devastate the entire nation and start from scratch. Like that's probably a bad idea.
Yep.
That's a very Zionist approach, I would say.
Yes.
Right? Just level the entire country and restart maybe install a new government. Bad idea.
Yeah,
right.
Well, look at what Trump did. He only targeted the military installations. It was only military. And then he did threaten.
Well, he remember he got the all-girls school next to the military installation that on one of those bombing campaigns, how terrible that was. And you're like, well, that's an interesting take because who also puts a all-girls school next to a military base?
I know.
It's not a very smart idea. And some would argue, we've got schools for our children on our American military bases.
It's just like how Hamas and Hezbollah put their rockets in civilian areas so that they can then blame the Israelis for targeting civilians. It's just a tactic. That's their it's a guerrilla terrorist tactic that they use. And yeah, that's very unfortunate. So that for sure did happen. The girls' school thing, like 100% fact. That's not just a bunch of nonsense.
No, it's not nonsense. It did happen, but I can't say that I don't know for sure. I don't believe like there was kids attending the school at that time. That's the one thing I can't attest to. I don't know, and I don't think they just completely annihilated a bunch of little elementary school or school age girls next to that military installation.
Yeah, of course not. I mean, the pains that the U.S. military goes through to avoid civilian casualties,
right.
it obviously they don't do that. Like you said, like who puts a military or puts a children's school next to a military installation? One that's hoping that if you target this military installation, you hit that and we have propaganda against you.
Okay, so let me get to the big question of this all. So we have this memorandum of understanding, no new capabilities for Iran, and we're essentially going to try to stop the terror in the Middle East. Okay, those are two big things. I mean, we don't want nuclear bombs in the hands of these terror maniacs, and we just don't want any more terror attacks, which that would be a blessing, obviously. If they abandon this agreement, what happens next? More of the same?
Well, honestly, I think all that has to happen next, like if I'm thinking if I'm in the power, what I would do is I would just restart the blockade and I would then airstrike all the reconstituted military or missile installations. Right? And then let's just go back to where we were before the signing of the memorandum of understanding. And then if they want to do, then we can do a tit for tat, sort of like mowing the lawn sort of thing. And then just let nature take its course. Because if you can't fund your government and you can't fund your economy, well, guess what's going to happen? Inevitable collapse, which is why the IRGC is being sidelined, because they want that. They see this as a retreat. That's what people don't understand. They don't see what the IRGC is saying, and they're not happy about this. But the pragmatists in the government that aren't happy about it either, they would like to, but the realities on the ground are the realities on the ground. You know what I mean? Their oil capacity is, completely full. They got to shut down, all their oil drilling sites, and that's how they make their money anyways. So it's just one of those things. And then you kind of have this kind of cat and mouse game in the shadows with the banking system. I think we seized upwards of $10 billion in like crypto and stuff like that from them, Scott Bessent found. So it's like, you just go back to where you were, and then, yeah, sure, you're always going to have the narrative, but whatever.
I think the first step, if they abandon this agreement and they do anything to act out in terror or continue to the pursuit of nuclear capabilities, is we ought to just send the full force of the American military over into the Strait of Hormuz, take over the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, and we take control over the Strait of Hormuz completely, and we make it an operation that's operated by the United States. We collect the tolls. We say who's open. We say when it's closed, and that's essentially the blockade. You lose the right to control this. That is literally one of the bottlenecks, of the world. And so why would the United States not go in?
They didn't have control to begin with. So they never had a right to control. They're just asserting that right to control because of the war. And that was kind of one of their points of leverage in negotiations.
So then why give these psycho terrorists this control back over this bottleneck?
Well, you're not giving them control back at all.
Seems like it.
All they can do, yeah, sure. But see, that's what they think. It's like, no, what they're doing is they're basically putting a gun to the head of every ship captain and saying, you pay us or, you don't pass through. You know what I mean? And then so how are they collecting tolls? It's all happening over the internet. And so Trump is like, sure, for all the tolls, we're just going to take that money. Because guess what? We know how to take the money from you. And that's what Scott Bessent was already doing. So they're like trying to do this transaction, internet banking. And we're just like, thank you. Yep, we'll take that. We'll take that. So that's why it's like the Iranians are completely backed into a corner here. And that's like, you don't have to do this whole crazy thing. You're just like a boa constrictor. You just let nature take its course. If you take off the bloodline, which is the oil flow, and then you eliminate their ability to project power, which is the missiles, which we proved because they reconstituted everything. And then in 2 nights, we took it all out again. And then all of a sudden they're announcing, okay, hey, we're going to sign this agreement. Well, why is that? Because they just spent all that time and effort rebuilding their military power, and we took it out in 48 hours.
So how do we make Americans happy moving forward?
You never make Americans happy. What the fuck are you talking about? I mean, we are the most entitled people in the world. I mean, look at what the Europeans coming over for the World Cup are showing us. They're excited about a fucking Buc-ee's.
And ranch dip.
Yeah, and ranch dip, and Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and we're crying the blues over here. It's like, actually, I mean, that's the biggest problem with Americans we're fat, we're lazy, and we're entitled. It's like, that's against what even built our nation before. The only thing you were entitled to was your effort. And now it's, well, you got to pay for my schooling. You got to pay for my child care. You got to give me a universal basic income. You got to pay for my food. Did I already say that? You got to pay for my education.
You got to let illegals vote in our elections.
Yep, got to let the illegals vote in the elections because no human is illegal. And they contribute to it's like,
and man, I'm sorry, just on a quick
insane
note, I'm very excited, honestly, for these next 60 days, the next, 2 months here to see what evolves and transpires out of Iran. But I'm also looking forward to November coming up because we will see officially if we are going to tell all of California that we were right, that Los Angeles Angelinos are crazy and we're all trying to allow for illegals to vote in our elections because they passed it in LA City Council to put it on the November ballot.
Exactly.
So we're going to see. We're going to see if you guys were all wrong, that they didn't want, nobody wants non-citizens voting in our elections. Nope, Karen Bass did it, you guys. So we're going to definitely see come November. And as we draw closer to November, we're also going to see where this Iran war develops and what it turns into. And I think there's it's not exciting at all. It's actually pretty terrifying, but there's going to be quite a few things that are going to transpire here in the next few months and before the end of the year. And we're going to have to see where it all leads to.
Absolutely.
So I think until then, we'll have to sit on it, see what news transpires, and we'll catch everybody on the next episode of The Spark Show. Any last comments before we take off, Cam?
Well, I already know what's going to happen with the LA getting illegals to vote. We'll see that it loses on election night, and it miraculously finds all the votes that it needed to pass after a month of counting votes. That's what's going to happen.
Any foresight on what's going to happen with Steve Hilton?
Same thing. He will win on election night, and then it'll be announced that Basada found the votes, because that's just the way it works, because the Democrats built the system and it works to their advantage every single time. And anytime anytime Republicans try to play at their own game, they send the Secretary of State after them.
All right. Well, you heard it here first on the Spark Show, everybody. More to come. We'll be talking with you guys on episode 14. Should have one rolling out on Sunday. Until then, we'll catch you next time.